So notice a few things about the chart. Point number one, the chart only gives you the anta conjugation, which means that you may have to add suffixes to get the desired conjugation. Notice, for example, a zoom in on the bottom right here, we have the wazn, forms 1 and 5, and the amr. For the form 1 amr, your chart has a hamzatul wasl with no vowel on it, a fa with a sukoon, and then an ayn with 3 possible vowels. You have a fatha, a damma, and a kasra. Now why is that? Again, don't forget the fa, ayn, and lam are wild cards. All 3 things are possible. So for example, in Arabic, we have the command udrus, which has a sukoon, a damma on the ra. We have the command iftah, can we get that? Iftah, which has a fatha on the ayn letter. And we have ijlis, meaning sit down, which has a kasra on the ayn letter. So watch out for that. All 3 things are possible, hence why your chart's voweled that way. By contrast, form 5 only has 1 possible voweling, so don't fall into any mistakes with that one. Now let's suppose you're talking to 2 people, to antuma, and you want to conjugate your fi'l amr accordingly. Well, you might not have covered how to do this. It's a pretty advanced topic in grammar, how to do the command for unusual pronouns like antuma or antuna and things like this. In our level 2 sequence, we cover this a little bit later in our course. But for now, the simple answer is you add an alif to the end. And so here, if'al or if'il or uf'ul or something like this, is going to become with an alif at the end, just like that. So let's take a scenario. Let's try doing it for darasa. How do we do this? We'll simply copy it across. So I have a hamzatul wasl, followed by my dal now. That's my fa letter with sukoon. The ayn is blank. You have to check and see how it's conjugated. Hopefully know it's yadrusu, tadrusu, etc. It's going to be a damma on there. Put a damma there. Then I have the lam letter, which is a sin, followed by an alif. Looks a little strange, but that's how you write it. Now what if we want to try form 5? Notice you have tafa'al at the bottom. You have to make an analogy. So here for form 1 we added an alif. Everything else stayed the same. We're going to do the same thing on the bottom. Keep your tafa'al, but add an alif to the end, and it'll look like this. Tafa'ala. Now we simply map the roots on, the dal, the ra, and the sin. Let's give it a shot. So the ta is part of the pattern. I'll put the ta there. Then I have my fa with a fatha, so I have this. Then I have the ayn letter ra with a damma and a fatha. And then the sin, which is a lam letter plus an alif. And I have tadarrasa, meaning you guys, both of you, should be taught. So let's move on to our next column after the fi'l amr, which is the masdar. So I'll erase this here. Get rid of that, get rid of that. Go back to our 10 forms table. And you can see the next column over, it's called the masdar. This is a bit of an unusual concept, but what exactly is it? It gives a lot of students a lot of confusion, and part of the problem perhaps is the unusual translations we have for it. It can be quite confusing. You might have heard it called, for example, an infinitive, or a verbal noun, or a gerund, or the abstract concept of the action. What's going on? A lot of strange translations here. Let's see if we can make some sense of all this confusingness. Well, moving on, we can define it perhaps more precisely as follows. We could say a masdar is related to the verb, but it's not a verb. Notice here, for example, I have a safar, which is the masdar meaning traveling or to travel, and I have the verb yusafir, which means he travels. You can clearly see the connection. There's obviously something going on here. They both have to do with traveling. But please note, however, there's a difference. The masdar is an ism, it's not a verb. And that means it can do things which verbs can't do. For example, a masdar can be the object of a sentence. I can say, for example, uhibbu as-safar, I love traveling, or I love to travel. I cannot make this sentence make sense saying, uhibbu usafiru. It doesn't make sense at all. This verb here, usafiru, cannot be the object of another verb. It doesn't make sense in Arabic. Another example. A masdar can be the subject of a sentence. Only isms can do that, verbs can't do that. So I could say, for example, as-safar jamil, traveling is beautiful, or to travel is wonderful. I can't say, yusafiru jamil. It doesn't make sense at all, unless, of course, Jamil is a man's name, and we're saying that he's traveling. And the third and final difference between the masdar and the verb is that the masdar is not connected to tense. Notice when I say, for example, yusafiru, it means he's traveling right now. Whereas when I say traveling, is it traveling in the future, traveling in the past? Anything's possible. It's a very important point. Every verb has a masdar. Watch out for that. So for example, yadrusu, he studies, has, for example, ad-dirasa, studying. And yaktubu, he writes, has al-kitaba, writing. But before you start thinking, wait a minute, they're rhyming. Ad-dirasa, al-kitaba. Please note there's many, many patterns for the masdar. They're not always in the pattern fi'ala. And so, for example, here, yash'uru bi doesn't go to ash-shi'ara, it goes to ash-shu'ur. And we put the particle with both. If it's a typical particle you're going to use with the verb, you'll see it also used with the masdar. So يشعر بكذا, يشعر بالبرد, he feels cold. I'm going to say الشعور بالبرد, feeling cold. Another example, يجلس على has a julus ala. Again, notice we have a rhyme, a shu'ur, a julus. This indicates there are patterns here, but you can't necessarily predict it. You have to always study the verb and see what the masdar is going to be. One final example, يعرف goes to al-ma'rifa. Again, note here on the right, I had yajlisu and ya'rifu, they rhymed over there, but their masdars were completely different patterns. So watch out for that. And the final question related to the masdar is, how do you translate it? You probably picked up from the way I've been doing it, there's at least two ways to do so. One possibility is to use the infinitive, that's again 2 plus the verb. So if I had a sentence like uhibbu al-qira'a refers to reading, but I'm going to use 2 plus the verb, so I'll say I love to read. That works great. Or I can use the abstract noun, that's the ing form, and I can say, for example, I love reading. Let's move on to the next part of our table, which is the ism al-fa'al. Well, the phrase ism al-fa'al is often translated by grammarians as the active participle. That is to say, someone who does the meaning of the roots. To make a comparison with English, it'll be more clear. Let's put a table here. I'll put English on the middle and Arabic on the right. And put the verb here. We often pick the verb to hit because it's nice and clear. So I have to hit there. In Arabic, the verb to hit is daraba. In English, we accomplish this by using the suffix er. And so, for example, a hitter, we might say, is also perhaps someone who hits. The basic idea is someone who's doing the action of hitting. In Arabic, I have specific patterns I can use. In form 1, it's the pattern fa'il. So let's try putting the dad, the ra, and the ba on the pattern fa'il. So my fa letter is the dad. That's my first root. Let's put that there. I have an alif added to the roots. That's part of the pattern. Put an alif there. Then I have an ayn letter with a kasra right there. So the ra is that. See that kasra right there. And the lam letter goes at the end. And I have darib. So a darib in Arabic should be the name for someone who's a hitter, someone who goes around hitting people. I can make it a little prettier, perhaps with a nice typewritten one like that. Please note that forms 2 through 10 have other patterns. You have pattern mufa'il for form 2, mufa'il for form 3, etc. And the ism maf'ul is quite similar. Let's go back to our chart. The very final column here on the left, ism al-maf'ul. The ism al-maf'ul is often translated as the past participle. You might even hear it called the passive participle. Make the same comparison. English in the middle, Arabic on the right. Pick a verb, let's do the same one. I'm going to change it a little bit just so it plays out nicely. I use to beat, basic same meaning. In Arabic, it'll still be daraba. How do I do this? In English, if you think about it, we use the suffix maybe ed or en, and occasionally we have an irregular past participle. And so we might say, for example, someone's been beaten. That's the past participle of to beat. If I change the verb to whacking, I might say someone's been whacked. Or to striking, they've been struck. Notice struck, we don't say striked or striken. We say struck. It's an irregular form in the English language. And in Arabic, I'm going to use the pattern maf'ul. So I simply map these roots onto that. Let's give it a shot. First I have a meme. That's part of the pattern. My fa letter is a dad. Takes a sukun. Then I have my ayn letter with a dhamma, so it's going to be a ra, like this. Then I have a waw, and then I have the final root letter, and I get madrub. Looks pretty ugly the way I wrote it. Let's make it look pretty, the nice typewritten version, like that. And please note, of course, the 10 forms table, that's only for form 1. There's lots and lots of patterns, so don't forget, forms 2 to 10 have their own patterns. For example, form 4 would be mudrab, form 7 would be mundarab, for example. Well, at this point, we've covered all of the column meanings. Let's go back here. We did the madi, we did the mudari', we did the fi'l amr, we did the masdar, we did the ism al-fa'al, we did the ism maf'ul. It's time now to jump into the depths of the chart, into forms 2 through 10, and particularly to engage the common meanings of all of these forms. So let's go ahead and do that.